and gentlemen, welcome back to another Jackrabbit Illustrated podcast. I'm Dallas. Got a special edition here today, kind of a follow-up from the draft info that we talked about here a couple weeks ago. Excited to talk to a special guest, Zach Zenner. For most of you, definitely needs no introduction, but I'll go through that in a minute for everybody watching and listening on the FCS Fans Nation group. First, I want to give a quick shout out to our title sponsor of the year, Capote Dealers of South Dakota. Guys, you've been such a great supporter of us in Jackrabbit Athletics. Thank you very much. So shout out to them, Capote Dealers of South Dakota, whether you're a farmer, rancher, hey, just somebody who loves the great outdoors and having cool toys. Kubota's got the equipment to get the job done. They got reliable tractors, rugged utility vehicles, efficient mowers, construction equipment, all kinds of stuff. They have it all. They're committed to providing top-notch service and support, ensuring you've got the right tool to get the job done. So visit your local Kubota dealer of South Dakota today. What are you waiting for? So again, I want to thank our guest. I'm kind of geeking out here. I don't think, Zach, we've ever met, but Zach Zenner, again, to South Dakota State fans. He is royalty. Played running back for the Jacks 2010 to 2014, hailing from Eagan, Minnesota. Some quick career achievements. I had to cut this back because there's so many of them. So standout running back, first player in Division I history to rush for 2,000 yards in 3 consecutive seasons. Good gracious. 3-time All-American. Finished his career with 8,211 all-purpose yards. And no, that was not during COVID. 69 touchdowns. And honestly, Zach's performance at SDSU just really helped kind of elevate the program on a national level. I remember I was at the Kansas game with the 99-yard touchdown. I actually didn't see it because I was standing up, cocking off to everyone behind me as he ran down the field. Then once we got into the NFL, he went undrafted 2015, immediately signed with Detroit as a free agent. Played there 2015 to 2019, had an injury in 2018. And then after that, a couple of short stints with Saints, Cardinals, and Dolphins. So all that, again, I had to cut back on everything I wanted to say. Zach, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Dallas. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so what I want to talk about today, again, is kind of a follow-up to the draft because it can mean so many different things. You hear just as a civilian, so-and-so played in the NFL, so-and-so could have played in the NFL, had a shot. It can mean a million different things. So I thought, man, why not talk to somebody that knows this in and out? And also on the, representation side has been involved too since he got done with his playing career. So I guess where I kind of wanted to start is we'll talk a little bit, maybe draft prep, and then go into kind of day of and immediately following that if that works. So in your experience, Zach, could you kind of talk about that prep process and leading up to the draft? What that was like for you?
Yeah, so we're talking from a player perspective here.
Yeah, let's talk player perspective, and then we'll really what I want to get at is how this applies to whether it's, the 8 South Dakota State guys that are looking like they've got a legit shot this year, and then all across the FCS. Like, what did that look like for them and you, and then kind of project that?
Yeah. So just to update people if they don't know, I've been a certified NFL agent since 2020. So that's kind of what Dallas was alluding to there, and doing some health coaching stuff as well, which we'll get into more later. In regards to, what does the pre-draft process look like for a potential NFL player, an NFL prospect? The bulk of it starts in September, right? Or the end of August, whenever that week 1 is, because we like to say that the bulk of the evaluation for a player is going to come from game film. So that's really where it begins, as far as preparation, right? And that's what I like to tell people is because there's a lot of athletes that will potentially wait until pro day, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to go have a great pro day and then I'm going to get a shot at the NFL. Well, the pro day and the, that pre-draft process is like 15 to 20% maybe of the evaluation process, with 80 to 85% of the evaluation being done based on your game film, right? What that looks like. So that's one thing, I tell any NFL hopeful is it's mainly based on your game film. So don't wait, right, till all of a sudden the season's done and now you're going to commit, right? You can make a difference with the pre-draft process, but in general, it's going to happen, during the season.
So my take on that is more like the pro day stuff is more like the prove it, right? You've already shown what you can do, and then that's just kind of like the all right, now I can show, with basically without worrying about the competition or anything like that. Now this is just the hey, athletically I can prove what I've shown on film. Is that accurate?
Right. Yeah. So you want it to match up with the tape, right? So like, um, if you are running past people on game day, you want your 40 time to show that, right? And that can kind of work either direction. There's other times where a pro day will make people go back and watch the tape, right? Where it's like, oh wow, like this 40 times really good. Let's see if I missed something on tape and go back and watch. To go back to your original question though, the timeline looks like, the season concludes. A player will go to either stay at their school or go to a facility to prepare for the track tests, which are going to occur at either pro day or at the combine or both. And between that time, so say that those programs, most of them start first week in January, and then the combine is the end of February, and pro days happen sometime in March or early April. Typically in January or early February, there is an all-star game, a college all-star game, which is another component of the evaluation process. Those games include the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Game, and the Hula Bowl, among others. The CGS is another one. There are a couple others out there. And you go to that game kind of in that in between. Those games typically last around 7 days, and then you'll go to the combine, participate there, and then have your pro day. And then following pro day or around pro day, that's when you'll see maybe some private workouts where teams will want to fly coaches in or evaluators in to work out players on an individual level. That can be more common with athletes that are going to go on the earlier rounds, like rounds 1 and 2, or maybe those that didn't get invited to the combine. And then you'll have Zoom calls, potentially visits with teams. They'll maybe fly you in to get medical, see meet the staff, meet everyone, wine and dine, some more mental evaluation on the prospect, and then you have the draft, which is end of April.
Cool you brought up CGS because I actually went down a few years ago and volunteered and helped at that. It was pretty cool. I like that their focus, College Gridiron Showcase, they focus on, they're kind of like the next tier, and their MO is really helping just guys maybe that are getting overlooked get a shot. And anyway, so it was really cool, and I'm glad you brought them up.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe as a player now, take yourself back to just how do you handle that emotionally going into that? Because I assume there was some uncertainty. If I remember right, I think at least as a fan, a lot of us thought you were a 5th, 6th round guy, ultimately going undrafted. Like, how tough is that? Like, what does that feel like? Especially you look at, a Garrett or, a lot of the guys this last year that, think they probably could have, should have got drafted, but didn't.
Yeah, you're saying like on the day of the draft.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, whether it's the day before or whatever, like, what is that like?
Yeah, couple players typically handle that a couple different ways. I handled that by going fishing. So I got on a boat, my aunt and uncle's cabin in northern Minnesota, north central Minnesota, and went fishing. And just had cell service. I was checking my phone, checking to see who got picked. And even with that kind of major distraction, kind of that mindless, watching the bobber fishing just for sunnies and bass and stuff. Even then, it was stressful. And I remember seeing people selected ahead of me that I thought I was better than. And everyone thinks that, it's not like I'm not alone in thinking that, right? Everyone thinks that, they're better than so-and-so or better than someone. Because you need that level of confidence, to play the game at a high level, to be even in consideration to get drafted. So, Yeah, I mean, that's how I dealt with it. There's no really way around it, around the stress of it, because it's outside of your control almost entirely, right? All the work's been done. Hay's in the barn. You just have to sit there and kind of hope and pray and see what's going to come about. Other players, though, will sit and write down the name of every player at their same position that was picked ahead of them, kind of make like a hit list, you know, of people they want to like outlast, right? So that's kind of like another way of dealing with it, is kind of like writing it down. One thing I typically don't recommend, which, you know, it happens and you see it all the time. I don't recommend people typically have gatherings, because that just adds to the pressure of it
I've had
all.
that same thought. That looks horrible, especially. I mean, you look at both the Yankees had that, and it looked like maybe they had sat and waited and waited and waited. Now they both got to come out and say that they already had UDFA contracts like together at the same place. So that was a
Hmm.
cool ending to that. But yeah, that'd be rough.
Well, it's just, you know, every time your phone rings, every time a pick comes on, everyone gets quiet, and then it's not you, and then it's not you, and it's a long day. I mean, it's a long day, and it's a long day without that. But then on the other hand, right, I understand it, where if it does go well and you do get picked, or you know, you do get your opportunity, everyone's there and ready to celebrate. So that's definitely a cool component as well. But yeah, people deal with it in different ways. Um, Ultimately, it's just a sit around and wait game. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like, I'm trying to compare it to something that like everyone has maybe experienced, and there's nothing quite like it. You know, I
No,
can't really put it, because it's all happening right that day, right?
yep.
I think we've all like taken a test, and you know, like an ACT, right, like the college exam, and you're waiting to see your results, but those results are going to come in an email. You know, you don't have to like think about it, and you're not watching other people's results come in from your same school, right, from your same high school. So there's
Yeah.
not, that's kind of what it'd be like, is if like everyone took the ACT, you know, or the SAT or whatever. And then like one weekend, all the results came in, and everyone's results were getting put up in like a sequential order. So
And
you can
then
imagine
it's
that.
yeah, that's probably a pretty good explanation of it. But then also, that is a very objective thing, whereas you can do everything right, check every box that you can going into the selection process, and it still is just up to other people's opinions and how their stuff falls. And that actually leads me back to something I was going to ask before. You talked about you joked about people making a hit list of guys taken before and a couple that you thought you were better than. So I'm assuming, I mean, do you know, like, the teams that need maybe a running back that could fit the teams that are potentially interested that could be looking at a player that plays the way you do, and then the other six players that maybe they're looking at, right? So are you kind of, I assume, are you watching that pretty closely, of like, all right, guy X, Y, and Z, I think I'm better than them, but I know that they could go to this place. I mean, is that something you kind of try to structure in your mind, or you just ignore that?
So for me as a player, I was not like that at all.
Okay.
So I was very much just good soldier. Even when I was in the NFL, like the play call is the play call, and I'm going to execute it the best I can. I'm not thinking about, oh, was this called at the right time? Is this team going to run the proper front for this look, right? And the same was true for the draft. It was just, I'm going to focus on what I can do and what I can control. And you know, I wasn't getting into fit. I wasn't getting into all that. Now my agent was doing that. And now me
Gotcha.
as an agent, I do that. I mean, in spades. Like I spend, as an agency, we'll spend hours and hours preparing for exactly what you talked about. Okay, what is this? Does our player fit this scheme? Right? Does our what are their needs? Who's in the room already? Right? Where could, you know, our player fit? So I'm, uh, you know, I think some players potentially do that. What you're talking about, I handle that very extensively now from the agency side. But as a player, I didn't worry one bit about that.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So let's flip now. I really wanted to focus on this post draft process a little bit, and maybe take us through that, because that's the stage that we're in for a lot of guys. We're kind of through now where obviously all the, the UDFA, the undrafted free agent contracts come pretty quickly, and then teams work through their rookie camp invites, and those are pretty much set. But I don't, maybe you obviously only know your specific path as a player, but as an agent, like what do those days following look like kind of for different groups of players? Can you talk about that a bit?
Immediately following the draft, you're saying, or
Well,
like in the days following?
I'm saying, well, see, in my ignorance, I actually don't know, because I know that obviously, like I've heard that Zach Hines, we talked to Coach Olson from SDSU. Zach Hines already had stuff set with the Chargers before the draft was even done, right? So I know that some guys, it's immediate and they know what they're doing the minute the clock ends.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, maybe guys where they are, it is up in the air a little bit. What does that look like?
Yeah, so it depends, right? It all depends on the prospect, the amount of interest. Like for me, for example, right, I probably had like 3 or 4 really strong suitors directly following the draft that my agent had been in contact with, you know, uh, leading up to the draft, right, and throughout, just to gauge interest, right? So that was kind of throughout the draft, had 3 or 4 solid suitors, but I remember getting calls the next day, Sunday, of people seeing if I wanted to go to their mini camp, right? So teams are trying to fill those spots as soon as possible. So, I think every organization would like all mini camp spots, and they want all undrafted free agent spots to be filled probably in that first hour, 2 hours after the draft.
Yep.
They probably want all the mini camp spots to be filled by that evening or the following afternoon, Sunday afternoon. And then, yeah, well, because these are commodities, right? It's not like, if you don't do it now, someone else will. And then the guys you wanted to bring in to fill your mini camp are going to be gone. And you have to keep going farther and farther down your list of players that you like. So yeah, they're trying to get that done as soon as possible. There are some situations though where, say for example, someone gets invited to 2 mini camps, because there's typically 2 weekends where those occur. That first weekend after the draft and then 14 days after the draft. So there's situations where a player's been invited to 2 mini camps. He goes to that first one and gets signed to the team as an undrafted free agent. Now there's an empty spot on that second weekend. So that's where you sometimes see players trickling in, or, someone is supposed to go to 2 mini camps and they roll their ankle in the first one, and now there's a spot in that second one. Or someone gets injured while training, right? Now they can't show up, or someone fails a physical right when they show up, and now there's a spot open. So there's essentially, most of it's going to be done in the first 48 hours, but then there's a couple spots that open up after that first weekend when people get signed, and then just a kind of collection of spots that can occur for various reasons.
That is something I've never thought about before, in how you'd have to structure that and open it up, but it makes sense. This is probably a really stupid question to anybody that knows what they're talking about, but I've heard this theory before, and I'm curious. What is it better to be a very late round draft pick or to be a highly sought after UDFA?
I'm familiar with this question. So I don't think it's an ignorant question.
Good.
Because there's kind of pluses and minuses, pros and cons to each side. So on one hand, if you go undrafted, there's potential to get more guaranteed money. And you also get to select, in quotes, where you go. That it's in quotes because you can only select from the teams that are interested,
Sure.
Right? It's not like you have picked from any roster and any team. It's like, okay, of my suitors, what's the best spot for me? So in that sense, you do get to, make a choice of what's the best pick for you. And there's potential to acquire even more guaranteed money following the draft than if you had been drafted. And we see that pretty consistently. There's typically about 10 to 15 players that will have more guarantees than if they had been drafted in the 7th round as an undrafted free agent. With all that said, it's better be drafted. it's always better to be drafted. I mean, there's just no way around it. You get most of the times the guarantees that occur from an undrafted free agent are happening in the form of guaranteed P5 salary, which could be offset. That guarantee can be fulfilled by practice squad salary.
Gotcha.
And the practice squad salary is 225. Now I'm blanking. It's either $225 or $250,000 this year. I'm blanking on what it is officially. But if you get drafted, your guarantees of, say, $150,000 signing bonus, right, in the 7th round, that's up front. And you're also very likely to receive, at minimum, that practice squad salary of $225. So it's not the same type of guarantee. Plus, when a team has drafted you, there's a certain connotation from an organizational perspective that comes with that, right?
Sure,
you put your stamp on that player. You used one of your picks, right? So from hey, are we going to keep this guy or this guy? I mean, I know for a fact there are conversations that occur where it's like, hey, these two players are the same, but we drafted, or maybe even undrafted guys, maybe a little bit better, but we drafted this guy at the same position, so we're going to keep him.
That's where I figured you're going to go with that, because I'd assume, call it pride or whatever, but you're using something that has tangible value to it to get this player, so therefore they have more value. Like, that's just business, if nothing else.
Yeah. Well, I will say though that there are teams that are known for doing the opposite, and not the opposite, but are known for, we don't care. This player's better. We don't care where you were picked. You know, we're keeping this guy on the active, and we're putting the draft pick on practice squad.
Cool. So, all right, I'm going to go through. I've got some numbers here. Hero Sports does a phenomenal job of keeping fans up to date, whether it's, this is a kind of the FCS to NFL tracker that they've got, but they also do, transfers and things like that. So check out Hero Sports if you're looking for this information. Okay, we are at currently, I believe, 173 FCS to NFL players this year of all varieties, right? So draft picks, UDFA, and minicamp tryouts. 173. 8 of them are Jackrabbits, which is nuts. And how that breaks down, you got 12 draft picks, 62 undrafted free agent contracts, and 99 minicamp tryout invites. So again, I think the whole reason why I wanted to talk here was you've got such a difference between, and this is me completely making this up. I don't do any of the things that you do, but obviously, your first and second rounders, that's probably obviously a separate tier. But even beyond that, you've got, guys like Amagaji out of, the Yale guy out of that's going to the Bears.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Mason, who I believe both those guys are probably penciled in to start, right? They're going to have a very different experience from even, like Harden, who was drafted out of USD 7th round.
Mm-hmm.
And then, from there you go to Deshaun, Isaiah, Hines, Jaden Jackson, all that. So once you get into minicamp or whatever the next step is, can you maybe talk about, and then, the other one I was going to bring out too, just as a familiar name, is Sean Chambers. He was a minicamp rookie invite to Carolina.
The Panthers.
Yep. All right, so do you just, in general terms, kind of want to talk through the experiences of each one of those tiers and what maybe that looks like to them?
Yeah. So like when, in terms of how the team views them when they're on the team, or like, I guess is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so a combination of either how the team looks at them or just what does that look like for me as a player? So either side of the coin doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. So starting with the draft picks, and I don't think there was when was Jalix Hunt taken?
Hunt was also 3rd round. He was right after Amagaji, I believe.
Amagaji, yeah. Okay, so there's a chance that those two players that were drafted in the 3rd round, but I know for a fact the 1st and 2nd rounders typically are flown out to the team the day after they're picked. So like they'll go out and meet everyone on whether that be Friday, right? Those 1st rounders, or Saturday, right? They get flown out and they meet the media, right? They meet the owners, right? It's a big show. So that's happening immediately, right? You're getting on a plane for those first 2 rounds for sure. And sometimes the third, it just depends, right? If like if you're the teams, like Haran probably didn't go Amagaji, right? Because they had Caleb Williams and Adunze, right? It's like, but if say if Amadaji was their first pick, right? They didn't have a first and a second, then he probably gets flown out, right? So it just kind of depends on where the picks fall and also, what type of player you are. Offensive linemen typically aren't as big of a draw for media or for fans, which is wrong. Big fan of the big man up front, right here. So, so that's kind of there. And then you're kind of like, you have an expectation if you're selected that high where you are expected to contribute in most organizations pretty much immediately. So you carry that pressure pretty much your entire career until you've either fulfilled it or failed at it for those top rounds. As you move into the middle rounds, you're definitely the team has a significant investment in you still in terms of signing bonus, right? And you are expected to definitely be a contributor, and the staff has high hopes for you and expectations. And then moving down to the later rounds, you likely don't. There's a good chance you don't have a role carved out for you, and you're being added in kind of like a we'll see type fashion, right? Like, okay, like we'll see what happens with this guy. We think he's a good fit here. We're going to try him here. Let's see what happens.
The whole take a flyer.
Yeah. Or it's hey, this guy's going to be great on special teams, right? You see that also with late round picks, like Ryan Watts out of Texas. I mean, that dude, he's a DB, played corner, likely more going to be a safety in the NFL, but he's just put together. I mean, so he's going to be great on special teams, right? So that's a good reason why you pick someone that was. So maybe it's like, hey, here's your role. We know your role on teams. That's what you're going to do, but we'll see what happens, kind of elsewhere. And then in the undrafted free agent, you're looking for good players who are going to, potentially get on the field. I think it's on average one undrafted free agent makes the active roster from every team. Aside from that, you're looking for players that are going to develop into that role or be really strong practice squad players that can come up for a few games, right, during the during the season. And then mini camp guys have essentially two practices over 2 days to show that they're worthy of a chance at a longer evaluation. And there's typically 2 players signed from each mini camp that get a full opportunity and they essentially get transferred to that undrafted free agent class. Gotcha. Going down that list, that kind of pattern again, that's the view from an organizational standpoint. But from a coach's standpoint, the farther you go down that list, the less individual coaching you're likely to receive. Just from a simple time as a resource standpoint, right? During the spring, teams are only allowed a certain amount of time with their players. And then during training camp, it's like, okay, am I going to coach my starters or am I going to coach the undrafted offensive lineman? Right. So you end up with kind of less and less coaching as you go down. Not always, but just stereotypically, less and less coaching as you go down that, and less attention from the coaches as you go down that chain, simply from time is a limited resource for these coaches, and they got to focus on certain players, not from a personal perspective. Of course, that changes, right? Like an undrafted free agent quarterback is likely going to get plenty of coaching because there's 3 guys in the room, sure, right? Compare that to an offensive lineman where there's 13 in the room and you're number 10. You're probably not going to get that as much one-on-one coaching as you would maybe need. So you got to figure it out for yourself.
Okay, that is exactly what I wanted to get at here today. Was that difference and what that might look like? Because again, as a casual fan or somebody that hasn't experienced any of that before, like you just hear stories about, oh, so and so had a shot, so and so did this, but how starkly different that experience could be, and that's exactly what I was curious about personally. And the other part too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've had this rant to so many different people just in my experience as a player and different guys I've been around different ages, is the difference how thin the difference is between the different groups. And so you've got the 1% of the 1% of the 1%, right? Okay, they're space aliens. Forget them for a minute, right? But once you get past that, the guy that's on the field, there's two guys on the sidelines that are basically as good. There's two guys on the practice squad basically good as them, and then there's 56 guys at home that are selling insurance, waiting for their phone to ring, that are almost as good as them. And it just that I don't know. It feels to me like, in the most part, that is. Hold on, Chad is sending me a message saying my mic is quiet.
I can hear you.
All right. Well, Zach can hear me. Hopefully, we can fix that in post production. Thank you. Appreciate that, bud. So anyway, I wanted to hear maybe you talk about kind of that difference in level and skill level, and then going into, so you make it through that, you're going to actual fall camp. What does that look like? How does a player, handle that stress and prepare for that?
Yeah. So, the differences, go to your first question, right? Which give that again to me, that first part one more time.
Sorry, I'm trying to fix my mic here.
Yeah, it's okay.
So anyway, I'm in my ramblings there, Zach. What I was getting at was the differences, how thin the skill level
the
difference
skill
can
level,
be, and just what does that look like as you go through that, and then you get ready for camp?
Yeah, and then fall camp. Okay, so I think it really depends on the position, right? It's so position dependent, and you see this play out in the preseason, right? That first group of offensive line is in, and the first group of quarterbacks is in, right? There's a significant drop off from the ones to the twos, right? Not always, not for every player, right? A lot of times there's two guys, right, in the backup offensive line that could likely start, right? But there is typically a significant difference in skill level between the starting quarterback and the backup quarterback, and the starting offensive lineman and the backup offensive lineman. I think you see the greatest differences there. However, moving to the other positions, I totally agree with you that the margins are very thin. And that's where sometimes politics can't come into play, like we just touched on, right? Being the higher draft pick gives you just that slightly leg up because, you've got the height, weight, speed profile, and you got picked, and people are going to play you because you got picked. In other versions, in other scenarios, right, where it's not as political, it is, hey, well, this person's slightly faster, or this person is slightly more reliable with their assignments, right? So now they're ahead. There is typically, though, although the margins are thin, there is a difference between active roster and practice squad players. Typically, there is just in my experience, there's a noticeable difference, right? It's kind of like if anyone here is or listening or watching has watched the UFL, right? The United Football League that's been playing over the weekends. We've got a client, Adrian Martinez, who should be the MVP of that league. Shout out to Adrian. But so as you're watching that, you can tell there's a difference, right? That's kind of what practice squad is like. Yes, it's the 1% of the 1%, but there are differences that are noticeable between active roster and practice squad. Again, it varies based on position, right? In terms of getting ready for training camp, right? A lot of what I'll say is it goes, not only now is the coaching a limited time resource, but also practice reps in training camp are a very limited resource. So as a coach, you have 6 running backs in your room. Just take my position, for example. You've got 6 running backs in your room. You have a month to get your team ready to start the regular season and go win a Super Bowl. Who are you going to give your reps to? As an undrafted free agent, I was lucky to get 2 reps in a team period, right? Maybe like 1 run and 1 play action.
Whoa.
Because a lot of times practice is a lot more heavy on the starters, right? And then you get into the game and you're thrown in, right? All of a sudden, the second half hits and you're taking every snap, and you've probably had 10 team reps all week, and now you're the guy. You and your other undrafted free agent buddy are taking every rep in the backfield for the second half, right? And that's kind of like you're thrown in the fire, and it's sink or swim time, right? You're either going to know your assignments because you've been studying, you know what you're doing, and you're going to swim and you've got a shot, or you're going to sink, and that might be the end of it.
So fair to say it's that much more important to just make sure that I mean, there's no margin for error at that point, right? Like you don't get the practice reps, but you get in, you screw up on Sunday, and that's, I mean, you probably don't have too many options after that.
Well, in the preseason, it's Thursday night, Friday night.
Sure.
But yes, no, yeah. Well, it depends, right? It depends. Now that goes into your chances depend on where you were picked again. It falls back on that. So if you're an undrafted free agent, you might have 1.5 chances, or maybe 2. If you're a 4th round pick and you blow it, you're going to get another chance. You blow it again, you're going to get another chance. You blow it again, you're going to get another chance. Yep. If you're a first round pick, you've got 3 whole years
sure.
to figure it out. You're going to get chances. So again, it just depends on where you're selected. How, to be fair, going back, I think I just in this conversation have thrown not shade, but just have made comments that maybe would make it seem like it's not fair. Like so-and-so got picked higher, right? It should be more of a meritocracy, right? No, those people got picked high for a reason. Okay. Right. Like they got picked high because of height, weight, speed, because of their play, because of how well they did in college, because of the competition they went up against. Right. So, you want to be picked higher, be better. Basically, be a better player in college. Those people earned those picks. There are some flyers here or there, but for the most part, though, everyone that gets picked early on is very well deserving.
Sure. Quick shout out to Chad. Thank you for pointing out that my mic was jacked up. This is the off season for us too. Just getting kind of dialed back in here. Do you?
No, I mean,
I'm sure it is. My bad. All right. I'll get my life together here, I promise. I'm on my lunch break. So we, I guess maybe in closing on these topics, any other advice to, college players that, that are looking to follow a similar path, like anything specific to current college players, advice that you always give, your guys that you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said it at the beginning, but the majority of the evaluation is going to come from your play on the field. So if you're going to sit around and say, oh, well, after this year's done, right, I'm going to really dial in, get crazy, ripped and fast for my pro day and have a great pro day, and that's going to be the difference. You're a year behind. You're a year too late, essentially, because if you had committed in the off season before your senior year and gone out and shown to the coaching staff that you deserve to be on the field, then gotten on the field and played, that's your best chance to make it in the NFL. I think also I would say just in today's transfer portal era, I think we can call it, if you transfer and don't play, there's nothing worse, right, for you. Like it goes back to it's kind of a play or an addition to my first comment, which is you need to play. You need to be on the field, right? So in order to have good game film, you need to be playing in the games. And if you transfer to a school and you are buried in the depth chart and don't play, that's it. You'd have been much better off staying where you were and playing than transferring. Now I know it gets confusing, and there's coaching staffs out there that will bring other players in, for example, right? When you're supposed to be the starter, all of a sudden a transfer comes in and now you're not. And, there's a lot of extenuating, unique situations, different circumstances, which this advice wouldn't apply. But most, that'd be the advice I would give is invest in yourself, invest in having a good season and try to make sure it's in a place where you're going to get on the field.
Well, I mean, clearly I'm a complete homer, but 3 names you should put the nail in the coffin for that for you. Tucker Kraft, right? Isaiah Davis, Mason McCormick. All three of those had publicized offers. They spoke openly about it. They shut it down, said, no, I'm going to stay. I'm going to play. I'm going to get on the field. I can still get to where I want to go from here. And they proved it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's huge. This isn't even really a question, but something that I've talked about in a lot of circles here lately. How cool is it now with the UFL looking like it's got backing, it's got legs, right? This is a viable league that I wonder if someday they're probably just trying to package it to turn around and sell it to the NFL at some point here down the road. But how cool is it just for guys to have more opportunities to keep playing football?
I love it. I mean, we've got a couple clients in the league right now. Austin Allen, Adrian Martinez, being two of those. And I think we're like at a minimum, you've invested so much of your time and your life into football. And then there's now a chance where it's not the NFL, but you can go make a decent living, right? I think the salaries are like 60 grand. And you make that money between February and like July, right? So it's like 60 grand over 5 months. Like that's a good living.
Yeah.
That's not bad at all. And you've got a shot at the NFL. You get to continue to play, to put game film out there. And I think it's just a good transition either way. You're either going to transition into the NFL, right? Say, you had an injury or something, right? And now you've got the game tape out there and you can prove it, or you got buried on the depth chart in training camp and then got released. And now this is your chance to show you got what it takes. So you're transitioning in or you're transitioning out. I think it's good for that too. We're like, hey, I've been on a couple practice squads, made some money. I still think I got what it takes. This will kind of be my last stop to try and see. And you're going to walk away with some decent money. And kind of give it a last chance. I'll tell you that if the XFL had been around in 2020, I probably would have played. And
really? Cool.
Yeah, because if it would have been kind of like what happened was so I was done in 19, and then I kind of spent a lot of time, energy, investment. Right, I got healthy again in 2020. And then that was the COVID year, so people didn't get signed. And I also hadn't finished very strong because of some of the injuries I've been dealing with. So yeah, I totally would have, in 2020 gone out, and I would have really considered it. I'd be like, hey, like I'm in great shape. I feel good. Like, let's go give this a shot. I will say there's a difference in positions, right? Being a running back in those leagues, like running back is like you could label it as like a fun position, right? Like, yep. I'm not sure, like, if you play offensive line, right? If you're transitioning out, if you want to go do battle, like sure. That. It's like an out transition, I see that more as like an in transition for the offensive lineman. But like I would have done it as just like an out transition. And hey, I've invested 10, 15 grand in my training. Right? It doesn't look like I'm going to get signed to the league. Let's go make 60 and get my ROI and then call it a career. It's honestly, as a fan, it's a pretty fun product. I don't know. I'm enjoying watching it, and I hope it works. And I guess as somebody that's got a kid, that's in high school now, and hopefully it's more chances for people to keep playing a game that they love. Yeah, I think we've covered everything here pretty well. Now, I'm curious, you and I chatted a little bit before we went on here, talking about what you're working on now. And we just got done talking about transitioning out of football. So this makes perfect sense. So do you want to maybe talk a little bit about what you're doing right now, get everybody up to speed? Yeah, so I mentioned the, representing clients, helping them make it to the NFL, and I love mentoring and coaching them through that process, both getting it to the NFL and then sticking in the NFL, helping them avoid pitfalls, taking the right roads, things like that. I also like coaching people with their health and wellness. And this is for everyone and anyone, not just athletes. But I do, have a couple of former athletes that work with me, and that's through my company which is called Zion Performance. And through that, I've got a couple different avenues. I've got a couple courses that teach people how to gain weight and muscle and how to lose fat and maintain their muscle. So those are called How to Gain and How to Lean. Those are directed for high school athletes because I recognize that that advice is needed out there. Everyone that's taken the How to Gain course, by the way, has gained 3 pounds in 3 weeks of muscle. So I've got good results there. And then doing coaching for business professionals. So helping a lot of people who have lost something, or like a lot of my clients are people that they used to be able to work long hours, then hang out with the wife or hang out with the wife and kids. And they had energy for all that. And then on the weekends, they're doing, home improvement projects and have all this energy. And now maybe that's gone, right? And after they have a meal, there's some gut dysfunction and they have bloating and they're just sitting on their phone or just can't get off the couch after work. And I'm helping people get that back, where whatever's gone wrong, whatever is missing, helping people get that edge back. So when they get done from a long day at work, they've got energy for their wife. They've got energy, excuse me, they've got energy for their kids. And I call it reclaiming their edge. Can also hone people's edges, right? Like do optimization, but a lot of times that's not urgent enough for people to spend and invest in my program. So a lot of times it's more about the reclaiming something that's been lost. People used to have energy, or they don't have a plan, or don't know what to do, right? The waters of wellness and nutrition are murky and muddy. And I sift through those and come out with the diamonds for people so they know exactly where to target their energy to optimize their body, mind, and life.
I feel like you are pitching me directly right now. I'm not sure if that's your goal, but it's
hey, sign up, man. Sign up. Let's go. I love it. It's just like with our agency clients, when I get what I call client wins, right? So I've got someone right now who's been working with me for a while. He's out in Michigan, right? We had a call the other day. He was leaving the gym and on his way home. But he had, I don't want to get him in trouble. I'm not going to say his name, but he's supposed to clock out at 5. He's been getting all his work done, clocking out at 3, going to the gym and home by 5 instead.
That's awesome.
And he used to crave gas station Slurpees. Slurpees do exist for those that don't know. 7-Elevens are in a lot of other parts of the country, and they sell Slurpees. And he told me he was addicted to gas station Slurpees, had a job that required a lot of traveling. He hasn't craved one in months. He's got more sustainable energy. And he's, he likes to tell me 29-inch waist, which he's very proud of.
So nutrition is such an odd thing, because everybody's got this weird wiring that they have from when they were a kid, right? There's something that someone told you about food in general, at least in my experience, that tends to stick with them. And it's this is bad, that's bad, stay away from fat. It's these weird generalizations that create this one size fits all ridiculous mindset around food. So like, what actually drove you to get into this? Because typically most people don't focus on something until it's already hit them, right? And I feel like maybe you're focusing on stuff that's a couple steps ahead of where you are in your journey. So like, what actually, I know, most SDSU fans know that, at one point you were going to be a doctor. So what led you towards this path?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was, initially going to go to medical school, and then during my professional career, a couple of things happened. One, I became enamored with the other half of wellness, right? So if say like the wellness is a scale, and say it's like looks like a speedometer, right? Like a semicircle. And on one half you have death on one side, and the middle is no symptoms, just no symptoms. And on the other side, right, is total wellness, right? And there's this spectrum, and most people reside in the side between death and no symptoms, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm either, I've moved from no symptoms. Now I have symptoms. I have some sort of condition. I have some sort of disease. I'm going to go to the doctor, and the doctor is going to give me something. And now I'm going to go back to no symptoms, right? And then they just do this thing back and forth, right? I became enamored with the other side, which is, what does consistent high energy throughout the day look like? what does a high functioning immune system look like? Right? What does a strong libido look like despite abusing my testosterone for 10 years? Right. So like that's what I became enamored with. And I recognized when the current healthcare system isn't addressing that side of my wellness meter, which is adapted by Reed Davis, the founder of the health coaching certification that I have. That was one. Two, ultimately I got a word from God I shouldn't go to medical school. That was honestly the first and foremost one. And three, had two sons and just was concerned about the time commitment that med school would require.
Gotcha.
In addition to a schedule that was not my own. So for those three reasons, I decided, upon the agency, a coaching, right, which is, and I knew two things really well. I knew about nutrition from optimizing my own body and mind during my career, and I knew a lot about football. So I was coaching people in the agency and in the health coaching space. But I will add about here's where really this new program really kind of came about, because I've got a new program that I've kind of launched a couple months ago. About a year and a half ago, yes, I was an agent. I was coaching people. I was a husband, and we had just had our third son. And I was doing all those things, but I wasn't really doing them at a high level. I was down to about 190 pounds. I played at 220. So I'd lost a lot of muscle. I had, definitely, I was busy, but I wasn't productive. And part of the issue was all my NFL strategies were failing me. I could no longer go to the gym for 2 hours, because then my wife was going to ask me, well, when am I going to the gym for 2 hours? And that does not compute, right? That's not going to work, 4 hours of gym time. So I had to mold and fit and transform the NFL strategies I had learned and fit them into my life as a business professional, business owner times two, a husband and a dad of three boys. And I'm back up to 220. I'm as sharp as I've ever been, super productive. And that was the impetus for kind of launching a new program for business professionals, because I recognize there's a lot of other people that are experiencing what I was experiencing. And going back to that initial transformation talk, right? Lack of energy, things like that. So that's how it came about.
Well, like I said, I feel like you're directly pitching me here. So, where I think that's interesting, and I work more with high school kids, and I'm doing some things on the nutritional side of it. People don't connect the dots a lot of times in the impact that nutrition has on their health overall, because it's not a direct cause and effect, right? There's nothing internally in your brain that goes, I feel shitty right now because I didn't drink any water earlier, right? It's that your brain doesn't make that connection. And it's the same thing of, like, I'm, as a business professional, we had an executive meeting yesterday. They always bring in lunch. We're having Panera, and I'm going, okay, what is the option that's going to make me feel good sitting here for the next 2.5 hours right now from Panera? And I know that's something that people will go, that's a relatively healthy thing. But in the end, I made a decision, and 2 hours in, I was dragging and tired and just regretting my choices. Right. So anyway, that's what an important thing to work on. So how do people find you? How do we find Zion Performance?
Yeah. So, zion-performance.com. That's my website. I'm posting all the time on Twitter these days, which isn't my favorite thing, but part of the gig. Also on LinkedIn, believe it or not. Those are the two main places I'm posting. So you can find me on there. A lot of my, content, I put out free stuff sometimes. Like I just did a couple weeks ago, I did a free shake recipe kind of giveaway, or whatever. Maybe that was last week. So posting on there, zion-performance.com. That's the best place, I guess.
Okay.
Find me. Yeah.
We're most active on Twitter typically here with JI. So close circuit to Matt. Make sure we all got to make sure we share a couple of things and help spread the word and get that out there. Anything else specific to Zion Performance that you want to talk about, or get it covered?
I think just some quick hitters, just based on just your story, right? As I think that happens to a lot of people. They pick something for lunch, and all of a sudden, just the crash, the postprandial dip, right? Blood sugar has crashed. Now energy has crashed. So a couple just quick hitter things for people listening that they can take advantage of to help make the blood sugar decline, which I do not want to demonize blood sugar. Is perfectly fine unless you've got type 1 or type 2 diabetes. But to help prevent a postprandial dip that causes lower energy levels, you can do 10 body weight squats after a meal. You can have a shot of apple cider vinegar and about 4 ounces of water before your meal. And you can lead your meal, or the first thing that touches your stomach should be protein and vegetables to help with the initial spike in blood glucose and then the subsequent fall. So, for example, say you're having steak, mashed potatoes, and asparagus, and then you've got some mango afterwards, right? Lead with, have a couple bites of steak and asparagus first, then free for all, then whatever you want, but just lead with the steak and the vegetables.
All right. I will try all of those things, to be honest with you, because that's something I'm kind of experimenting with. And I went through the same, again, not in any way to compare me with you, but had kind of a similar journey, got done playing, lost a ton of weight, went home for Christmas. Everybody thought I had cancer or something because I was so skinny. It did. I went home because I was a lineman, right? So I spent 10 years of my life force feeding myself, which I'm now doing to my son. And then it was like, I got done. I'm like, I can eat a salad. I can skip lunch if I want. This is amazing. And lost a ton of weight, and everybody thought something was horribly wrong. So anyway, and then your life changes as you get older and metabolism slows down. And it's tough. And you also have more competing priorities, as you mentioned. So what a cool service.
That's interesting though, Dallas. You mentioned metabolism slows down. Assuming hormones remain consistent, which is a big variable, but assuming consistent hormone levels, actually, Herman Poncer did a long study. He came out with a book called Burn, where they found that using doubly labeled water to measure caloric expenditure, they found that metabolism typically does not slow down until you're about 60 or 65.
Really?
You have slowed down. Is who's slowed down, not your metabolism. You have slowed down.
All right, that sounds like a challenge. I got 58 minutes left on my lunch break here, so when we get done here, I'm going to go hit the garage.
Well, that's the thing, though. That's another beauty of what I do, right? Is to provide support and accountability. A lot of people, they get stuck in this thing where it's like, oh well, I don't have time to go to the gym, so I'm going to do nothing at all. That's the wrong mentality. There's so many. If going to the gym doesn't fit in your schedule and you can't be consistent with it, that's not a good recommendation. You need to find something that fits into your life. Like you, right? You have a garage gym, perfect. Or not even a garage gym, just a space to go work out in your garage, right? Maybe it's not a gym. That's a great strategy, right? Something you can be consistent with and go in and get some quick work in. Because no matter what you get in right now after this call, that's worth it and that counts.
So no, I love that. And I feel like you and I could probably nerd out on some on some topics here, but like I track habits every single day, things that I work on, and I've got a minimum for exercise, which is basically 20 minutes of get your ass out there and go do something. Whether I can, like, I know that my minimum, even if I'm not feeling it and I don't have more than 20 minutes, I can go jump on the rower, get my heart rate up and watch TV for 20 minutes. And that's fine. Now, typically when I get out there and do that, I end up doing more, right?
Right.
But it's still about finding that minimal amount, because exactly something is better than nothing. And over time, all that stuff stacks up, just like nutritional choices. That's a hell of a point.
Yeah, absolutely, man. No, it's that's the biggest thing though, being consistent and it all counts, right? If people get stuck in that trap. I think so too. I do want to clarify, I did throw out the challenge there, and there are extenuating circumstances where metabolism truly has slowed down, but for the vast majority of us, it's just us that has slowed down. Yeah, no, you know what? I threw out a lazy scripted statement in response to that. So nope, I'm behind you. All right. Well, I tell you what, we're at about an hour here. I've kept you long enough. Everybody go to zion-performance.com. Check out what Zach is working on. In closing, all right, so I've got a completely selfish question. Yeah. I've asked Chris Oladokin this, and I've also asked Mason McCormick this, so now I'm asking you. My son that I've mentioned, Hudson, is 15.
He's going to be a sophomore in high school next year. He has a dream of playing college football and of playing in the NFL. So speaking to him or to your sons, however you want to do this, what advice do you have for him?
Man, I think the biggest thing would be to learn to love or to fall in love with the process rather than the outcomes. Meaning if you're in it, if you're doing something or you're working hard, and what position is he playing?
He is somewhere between a linebacker and a defensive end.
Yeah. Okay. So, as you're preparing to, go make tackles or go make plays essentially in your games, if everything is based on making plays on Friday nights or whenever the games are, right? If it's the JV on Saturdays or on Thursdays, that's not going to sustain you, because when you get to college and it's now much harder, and maybe you're not even playing right on Saturdays, what's going to sustain you is a love of the process and a love of the preparation and everything that goes into making those plays. That's more of a cherry on top. Those plays, making tackles, making sacks, scoring touchdowns, whatever it is, should be viewed more as the cherry on top rather than the ultimate reward. And the reward is more found in those day-to-day wins, getting 1% better in the weight room, or getting 1% faster, or not making any, knowing your assignments, things like that. Because loving the process of what it takes to be a good player and athlete, that's what's going to carry you in the hard times, not the wins during the games and those victories.
Awesome. Thanks, man. All right. Yeah. Zach Zenner, everybody. South Dakota State legend, Detroit Lion. Jackrabbit Illustrated, we will start getting our preseason content together, I would guess, in July. We'll start doing some breakdowns for Missouri Valley, FCS at large, things like that, position breakdowns. Can't wait. Until then, go big, go blue, go Jacks.